Welcome to the last session of the day. It's been a rather packed schedule for all of us, but I have the privilege of introducing perhaps the most distinguished guest today. Sachin Pilot is a senior leader of the Indian National Congress. He is currently a member of the Rajasthan Legislative Assembly. In the past, he's been the Deputy Chief Minister of the state of Rajasthan, and he's also served as a Minister of State under the Manmohan Singh government. What makes Sachin very unique in my mind is that he is able to combine what I think is mass leadership, but also with intellectually and academically driven thought process. And even more exceptional, he is one of the few politicians, who is actively part of the Indian Territorial Army. So I would be correct rather if referring to him as Captain Sachin Pilot. Please put your hand together to welcome Sachin Pilot.
Thank you.
So we will be talking to him about, vision for governance for the future India. And I would like for Sachin to start opening up the topic. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kishen. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. Rather warm, but everyone here in England loves warm weather. So I was going through what the theme of the conference was, and I think it's appropriate for all of us to just spend, at least listen to what I have to say in terms of what I think is our position as a country, where we are, the distance we've traveled, the path we've already seen, and where we need to go. As you all know, we just finished elections back home in India, and we have a new government there. Suffice to say that this election was interesting, and the results are what they are. We have a government. There's no point in discussing all of that. But I thought I'll spend a couple of minutes just to give you my view, my perspective on how I thought things panned out and what the results indicate, besides the fact that there is a government, there is opposition. India is one of those few countries where our elections and our democracy is so deeply seated, and it's so passionately involved and mesmerizing that all of us take great pride in being a part of it. You may agree or disagree, you may win or lose, but the fact that our elections, our politics, and our 75-year journey has been a phenomenal one. I do believe, however, that moving forward, we have to be a country that learns quickly how to be able to punch above our weight. We have everything going for ourselves. We have a young population, we have resources, size, scale, technology, hard work, fantastic history, and all of that. But I still believe that we can't take things for granted. And whenever one or anyone, any institute, any entity, any organization takes things for granted, that's when the slide happens. So we have to at all times be aware of the pitfalls of our future forward, way forward, and what we might do to course correct if and when needed. The elections happened, and like I said, we have a new government, but it also tells you that the people of India have given a clear message in this election. And I say this not because I'm a member of the Congress party, but as an opposition, we've been 10 years in opposition, and we've had a government for 10 years. So clearly, this new government is a coalition government, and we don't know what the future plans might be, but as of now, it certainly seems that people have voted with a certain indication towards which party, alliance, or which formation got less or more votes. But the Congress party, for instance, we were 5 MPs when we went to polls, and we have 100 MPs today. And the BJP had 303 going into polls. They've got 240 now. So there was no clear mandate for a party to form a government. It was a coalition government. But once elections are over, I think what is required is that we have a semblance of balance inside of Parliament and outside of Parliament, and all stakeholders. And I think that the most important and the most significant stakeholder are the people of India, the voters, because they are the masters of our destiny as politicians, what we do or we don't do. So we need to have a watchful electorate. We need to have an active opposition. We need to have a government that is happy to debate, discuss, to create consensus, and do what is right for India. What is right for a party or a government is significantly less important than what is important for India. So this election, like other elections, have been very, very important. But our country really, I repeat this when I say that there is so much going for us, but we can't take things for granted. Therefore, the policy making, the execution, the importance of institutions of our country are very, very important. The other small point I'll make before I finish my initial comments is that we are young today. The average age of Indians is 28. So this demographic dividend is there for a short time. 30 years hence, we'll have another problem, which is how to keep our aged well looked after. A lot of countries in Europe and Asia are facing that. So we have this window, and we must really try and cash into that, because 30 years later, you can get everything, but time doesn't come back. So all of our growth, our productivity are moving forward. India is growing at 6-7% a year. And I say this many times, we need to have something to make us grow to 9 to 10% for 10 years. That's when you create enough space, enough living standards, and enough GDP per capita for all of us to flourish and move forward together. It can't be that a portion of our country does really well and a large portion gets left behind. So we have to take everyone together. And that, I think, is a collective responsibility of everyone, whether it's business houses, society at large, politicians much more so, government and opposition. So I hope we're able to do this, and I hope we are able to deliver to the expectations of the next generation of Indians. I want to stop there.
Thanks, Sachin. You've laid out many themes that we can pick on for questioning. I would like, because you spoke about elections, and we are essentially speaking also about governance and future, irrespective of what persuasion one comes from, the competitive welfareism has become one of the ways to woo voters, but also a form of governance in India now. As an economist, sometimes I think, what are the kind of trade-offs that we have to consider when we get into this competition of welfare policies? And obviously, not all of them are good, not all of them are bad. I just wanted to see where you stand and how do you think this should go ahead? And when I mean, if I can clarify what I mean by trade-offs, particularly with respect to fiscal prudence and also with respect to long-term capital asset creation and so on.
Define welfareism.
Right. So if we were to say the kind of manifestos that we saw during the elections, there were many mistruths probably about it, but also quite a few.
No, it's printed. There's no mistruth about it.
Yeah, but I agree with it. Many state governments run very large cash transfers. These are not particularly going towards creation of any long-term assets. I agree there may be quick solutions for perhaps unemployment benefits or other kinds of benefits. So when a sizable amount of state GDP or budget goes to something like this, are we at a point where it's becoming risky, where we're not investing enough in capital expenditure?
Okay, so I take your point, and I can see that you're a very hardworking economist because your worries stem from the fact that you study this. As a policymaker, I've had some experience, and I'll be very honest with you. We have to differentiate, right? So there is what is called populism, then you have welfareism, and then you have what is called free doles, subsidies, waivers, free electricity, things of that nature. So India, as you know, is a very complex country. It's not homogeneous. And there are large parts of our country where people are on the fringes, whether they're geographical fringes or societal fringes. Now, those groups or those tens of millions of people who are on the fringes of our society, if we are not able to reach out for them, I'm not putting numbers on it. I'm just saying, in principle, if you don't have that mindset of being able to reach out to those people who deserve and need the helping hand of the governments, the budgetary allocations, of policy making, then your job as an elected government, I think, is unfulfilled. On the other hand, if your only way to come back to power is by giving everything free and making people happy in the short term, then you're doing a long-term damage to the country, not just this exchequer, but to the future of the country. And many countries around the world have gone down doing that, but India is too large a country to afford to do that. So it has to be a prudent, balanced way that a government functions, know its finances, targeted subsidy. What happens in India is a lot of our resources get depleted because of lack of targeting. You announce a policy, money goes out, it doesn't get to the targeted people or the area that we intend. And sometimes there's not enough oversight. There are many loopholes and leakages. That can be prevented. But if you ask me, the short answer I have for you is that you cannot stop caring for the ones that have been left behind in the growth story. You have to be able to care for them and bring them on board. Because when you have an uneven growth, it has its own pitfalls. It creates such disparity in society that is unsustainable for a functioning republic. But like I said, you have to balance it out. If you're one way or the other way, you can't be oblivious to the fact. There are countries in the West, for example, food coupons, subsidies. France, for example, I can say that because I'm sitting in England, but in France, they have so much subsidy given to their farmers. I was reading somewhere that the amount of subsidy the French government gives to its farmers, dairy farmers, it's enough for every cow in the world to fly first class around the world twice. That's the kind of subsidy those rich governments are giving to a very small percentage because they have a politically significant presence in France, that, the cheese and the milk and so on and so forth. I'm just giving an example. So when you have these trade negotiations, WTO and FTAs, a lot of back and forth, and why all Indian governments have said that we cannot afford to disturb the fragile nature of the agrarian ecosystem. Because if the market forces were to come in play and demand supply was to determine everything, then it will be a collapse of catastrophic nature. Right? So we have to be very sensitive of our needs, our realities. At the same time, you have to have policy making that is futuristic, that creates wealth for everybody, that's job-oriented, that investments come in. India becomes a real transit point for global trade, global inflows, investments, and I see there is no reason why we can't do that. Not to compare ourselves with any other nation, but I think India has so much more that we can fulfill those gaps that for decades have left a big hole in terms of standard of living, healthcare, nutrition, education, for our poorest. And you still have enough talent, energy, imagination, creativity, strength, vision, and caliber that you can create so much goods and services for all to benefit. So it's not binary. We have to be mindful and careful, but a balanced approach, I think, is what's important.
So from welfare and fiscal policies towards foreign policies, since we're sitting in England, you spoke about how India needs to punch above its weight, right? And that's sort of an important part for the next 20, 30 odd years before we run out of time. Some people that you speak to on a daily basis tell you that they've never seen as aggressive a foreign stance that India has had in the last 5-10 years in a long time. And some would even sort of go on to sort of ask, is that the right way? Do you fear that India might fall into that sort of pitfall that China has? Or generally, how do you see India's foreign policy evolve? Do you think are we punching above our weight? Do you think that's the right sort of mix of where we should be? How do you and the Congress Party generally think about that?
Okay, so I'm not a foreign policy expert, but I'll share some of my personal views on this. What is foreign policy is, again, this is my view, is how you achieve your nation state's targets, whatever they may be, whether it's stakeholdership, participation, greatest say in world discussions, UN, so on and so forth. So that's a foreign policy, how you manage relations with bilateral with countries and multilateral with other nations. And how you get to the aim of your foreign policy, that instrument is called diplomacy. Right? So India, I think, since our independence, has always been recognized as a beacon of democratic values, a country that is secular, liberal, accepting, and we had always had our space in the world. But as time has gone by, India has become a more important player because Indian economy has grown. Indian entrepreneurs have shown their mettle around the world. Indian young minds have gone and created talent all across the globe. And India has achieved many, many things historically and even now. That's where we're able to ask for what we think is truly rightfully ours. If you ask me, should India have a place in the UN Security Council? Absolutely yes. It's not a question of this shade of government or that shade of government. That's what we have. You can't have a UN which is post-Second World War, and it kind of defines global developments. It's just not possible. Every fifth person on the planet is Indian. How can you have a Security Council and not have India on it? It defies logic. You said, the question was, last 5-7 years, have we done enough? Is that what the question was?
Have we become a little more aggressive? And do you fear that, not maybe aggressive is the wrong word, but...
It is, because in diplomacy, foreign policy, there's no aggression. It's about getting what is right. And you see, you have to put your country's self-interest first. Right? There should be no compromise. And everyone does it. US does it, this country does it. Why should we not do it? But does that mean that you don't call out when we're supposed to? You only say good things when you're in an easy spot. When you're in a tough spot, that's what counts. Your character is visible when you're in a tight spot, you're in a tough position, and a difficult call to make. When you have to call out on issues that are important. So that's what defines a global power. Right? So the world has changed, and I think India has somehow really been able to maintain its global presence. And I give credit to anyone who's involved in foreign policy, but more importantly, I give credit to India's people. Because, if we were a small island nation somewhere, no matter who's the president or the prime minister, no one would give that much of a toss, honestly. It's because India, what we are and what we represent historically and in current times is that what we say, what I say, or anybody else in the government or opposition says has a certain gravitas to it.
Sachin, you've been, you're one of the youngest parliamentarians.
You got to stop saying that. I'm 46, 47.
Yeah.
I saw many young people come in and out, so we've crossed that bridge long ago.
So since then, you've seen quite a few, you've worked at the central government, you've been at the state government. So my next question is got to do with state capacity generally. And the kind of things that states generally target to be their, priorities and what they can actually deliver on. It seems to be probably punching above again, using this phrase, more than what they can actually deliver on. One example probably is, job creation. Is it something a government can do? And generally, my question is, using the state capacity that we have, what are the things that can actually be targeted and done well in your long experience with governance?
It's important you ask that question because we all keep talking about jobs, right? And whether it's the US elections, whether it's India elections, we talk about employment, job creation. How do you actually do it? Okay, how do you actually create jobs, at least for the educated and qualified young boys and girls? Well, it's not possible for any government in any country to give all jobs. In India, there is a typical fascination for government jobs for various reasons. But I think job creation happens when there is a stable policy regime, there is a stable tax regime, and you have industry and investments that foster jobs. So India has a very large agrarian ecosystem. Almost 60% of all Indians are involved in farmland, farming, dairy, fishing, whatever. You have to move a lot of those people out of their traditional occupations because that's not remunerative enough right now. And land holdings are getting divided. Every generation, land holdings get divided. So you have to shift all those people who have done pretty much work on farmlands to get out there and ideally move on to a shop floor or an industrial base. Now, I think for some reason we have not been able to tap into that. We don't have the kind of manufacturing capacities some of our Asian neighbors have. So we kind of need to get that, fix that. Then you also must understand that it's not the Fortune 500 companies or the blue chip companies that actually create jobs. It's the small and medium scale industries. Look at Germany, for example. In that country, most employment comes from small cottage scale industries, employing 50, 70, 100, 200 people. So to think I'll get this big company, it'll employ 20,000 people, a big car company, a big chip manufacturer, that's only tip of the iceberg. The real hard work is how do you incentivize middle-rung companies to come and start manufacturing in India. And I think for that, it's important that the states become competitive. One state in the south, let's say Kerala will say something, Telangana will say something, so you compete with each other in giving incentives. You get manufacturing to come to your states, and some states actually have done a good job on it. So state governments have an important role to play. The national government also has to create that safe space, that ecosystem of cooperation with, the federal structure of our country has somehow come under strain in the last few years because the government of India makes the larger policies, but the state government executes those policies. So governments have a very important role to play. And the other thing is about skills. So you have young people in India who are graduating with bachelor's degree, master's degree, engineering degrees. But how many of them are actually employable? Because there's a disconnect between what the industry wants and what we are giving them as diplomas and curriculum and syllabus. So that has to change. While I was in government, I tried really hard to get the industry associations, the FICCI, the CII, the Chamber of Commerce, to come and talk to vice chancellors, education ministers, principals, the thought leaders in universities, because we must give those curriculum and syllabus to kids that once they study those, private industry will absorb them. What's the point of churning out millions of young people with fantastic certificates and degrees and they don't get employed, they don't get absorbed? So the market must be able to absorb what universities produce. That's one big disconnect that's happened in the last couple of decades. But at my mind, in India, jobs remain one of the top priorities for all of us. Today, we have the highest recorded unemployment. It's about 40%, some data has suggested. So it's untenable. We have to find young, because if you have young people who are educated and are unemployed or underemployed, it creates levels of frustrations that you will have no answer to. And that again becomes a big, huge challenge for any society, any government. So jobs are very, very important, but one has to have a singular focused on a war footing to start creating jobs. Anyone comes to you, say, how many jobs will you bring? When I was in the government of Rajasthan, there were some talks about some industry. I said, look, I don't care how many dollars you bring in, and you tell me what you need. Electricity, water, land, doesn't matter. How many young kids will get jobs, right? It should be as simple a transaction as that. If we do that singularly, I think we can cut back on some of the unemployment numbers.
Okay, amazing. So talking about jobs, and you're absolutely right, we need to focus on the manufacturing-led jobs because that's where the real sort of bulk is. But just to sort of shift focus a little bit, one area that Indians have done exceptionally well and there'd be very little debate about it is IT technology, right? Sure enough, it doesn't sort of create the same level of jobs as manufacturing does, but nevertheless, it's a soft power for India. So moving towards in that direction, I was hearing this interview that you did about 15 years ago at your alumnus Wharton, where you
so
said...
How much research have you done, honestly?
Not much, I have to admit, not
15
much.
years ago.
we've been kept very busy organizing this, so not much. 15 years ago you mentioned this, and it's just interesting because of the passage of time and what's happened since, is that the government needs to deliver goods and services to its citizens with a digital interface. That's what you sort of alluded to. Now, since then, a lot has happened. India is obviously become what it has. We do more digital payments than any other nation does, about 3x of that of USA, if I'm wrong, if I'm right. But the question is, do you think we've done enough? And do you think, where do you think we need to do more to make sure that that this digital services are delivered to citizens, not just in places like Jaipur or Delhi or Mumbai, but also places, in Baran or those sort of places?
So, I was minister for IT back in the day. And you're right. Thank you for pointing out. 15 years ago it was, right? 12 years ago, long time back. And at that time, we started the first program of broadband to the villages. So we have almost 6 lakh villages, 600,000 villages. And we wanted to give broadband to the villages, fiber where possible, otherwise last mile was digital, like Wi-Fi or whatever. So that was Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, 2009, as we first started the program. And because what happened is that India, we noticed, and I'm confessing that India does not have the best sort of infrastructure, railways, ports, airways. Of course, we're getting better now in the last 20 years, but traditionally, from 60s to 90s, we didn't have the best infrastructure of roads, so on and so forth. So when we formed the government in 2009, it's difficult to go back and start making all the roads, all the railway lines and airports all over again, because that will be a brownfield project. IT and IT services would be a greenfield project. So as I said, if we couldn't have the world's best airports, ports, railways for all those years, why can't we have the world's best fiber optics, cable, Wi-Fi, internet services? Because that's just coming up, and we have a head start. And when we're doing something, let's do the best ever. So that time, I think there was talk of putting fiber down to the home. So we had fiber to the home for the first time in 2010. It was a big, thick orange thing, that we had dug up in somewhere in New Delhi. So that is a thought of creating India an ecosystem second to none, like better than anywhere in the world. We wanted to do that, and we put a lot of money in doing it. That was, again, thinking ahead, because we had the opportunity. talking about cash payments and all that, those services, it's good, it's happening. But what we have to do with our IT, just to add to this, by the way, so while I was doing all this, and we touched our first $100 billion exports, IT and IT services, and there was a facilitation program. And of course, because I was minister, getting all the bouquets and stuff. So one young entrepreneur was making a speech before I had to speak. And he says, we've done so well in IT sector, not because of the government, but despite the government, because the government's kept out of it, which is true, because when I was in that ministry, I said, look, we are no experts. Government has little knowledge in this. Let the private sector come and you guide us in how to frame policy. Let's have an investor-friendly policy-making regime. That Parliament and I can do. But you guys know the technology, you know your stuff, you learn best practices, you reverse engineer, you do whatever you want, just give me the best products, and then we can help you do it. So it is collaborative. And the IT sector has done really well for many reasons, but to answer your question in brief, to my mind, it's not important. All these end delivery services and paying online and all that. What we have to go is back. We have to create intellectual capital. We have to have, unicorns of India that we can, really call the first billion, first trillion companies. Because then that creates a mindset amongst young people to be competitive, to be path-breaking entrepreneurs, to create something, to have patents, to invent something new. That's where the value is. Value is not, earning 1 paisa for every transaction. That's retail technology. We have to go back end and create and have the ideation that is really something that we can all be proud of. And this happens in many countries where you have idea, concept, and you outsource the manufacturing and people make a lot of money out of it. So that's the thing we have to focus on, I think.
I have an open-ended question, particularly about party politics and political system.
That's a big shift, right? From
Yeah. So before we open up to the audience, I thought I could get your thoughts on this. One can think of many reforms, specifically from an academic standpoint. For instance, I'm very interested in how political party funding works. Recent legal judgments have been even more interesting. Or about party constitutions, if they can be enforced in court of law or not. What do you think, if we are going towards a vision for future governance in India, the primary vehicle to deliver that are political parties? Without referring to any party, you're free to refer, but what do you think are the big reforms that we need to look for in the next 25 years?
Within political parties or within...
Party systems, rather.
Parties, see, there's election commission, which actually oversees all of the functioning of each political party, registration, election, so on and so forth. How robust that is, it's an open question. But I don't think Indian political parties need to have an official reform. I think we have to just be pragmatic and realistic and be open and honest to ourselves. My party, for example, the Congress party, 2 years ago we had a meeting in Rajasthan. It was called the Udaipur Declaration. And we decided unanimously in the working committee that 50% of all party posts will go to people below the age of 50. And 50% of those posts will go to the marginalized section, women, Dalits, tribals, backwards, etc. So that there is equal participation. That's something that's internal to the party. I think it's wrong to have sort of a mandate of what each party should do because each party represents an ideology. It represents a different kind of history and what promise to the future you have. And when parties go to the people, and when I go as a politician or a policymaker to campaign, I have to promise power to the people that work for the party. It's the nature of the beast, that's how it works. But I take your point that political parties have to be responsible also in allocating tickets, in sticking to their stand. You can't say one thing in opposition and then completely do a somersault and do the other thing. So those things are not enforced by legal means. It has to come from within. It has to be bottom-up approach. It has to be something that people look within and parties realize. But I think responsible and mature political parties should do that, and they should do it more often and more openly.
Right. Sticking on to the theme of political parties, one thing that I've noticed over the last few years is that political parties increasingly are converging in terms of what they offer to a voter. And this is by no means I don't mean to sort of be the party
okay,
pooper
it's
here.
okay.
I'm trying to frame it very nicely. But when elections arrive, you just can't get enough of Congress netas visiting temples now. And, there's a convergence of political thought and ideology, not just in terms of earlier, you'd be hard-pressed to find differences in terms of what they offer to voters economically, because like you said, I mean, there's welfareism is inherent to the Indian political parties. But now increasingly even identity politics seems to be converging in a singular direction. So how do you sort of think that affects the ethos of democracy? Or do you sort of disagree in that the Congress parties, it offers something very different to the voter than a BJP or other political parties?
Okay, so I think it's important, you must hear my views on this. Politics is about speaking up for the people, parties, candidates contest, win and lose election, form governments and opposition. A government is formed, and India, since 1952, we've had elections continuously, and I'm proud of our history that we've had successful, peaceful transition of power, which is not that common in our part of the world. But when you run a government, the state must run by the constitution, by the rule of law. It cannot be run or influenced by likes, dislikes, by my whims and fancies, by my personal agendas, or by religious identity. Religion in our country is an open concept, and every person in our country, every 140 crore Indians, have an equal right to pray, practice, and preach whatever they want. As long as you don't break the law and you don't confront anything, that's how it should be. But my religion is a matter of my home and heart. It can't decide how I should frame policy, how I should deliver justice, and the Constitution is second to none when it comes to politics. So whether you're this religion, that caste, that language, that background, it has no bearing on it. So the law and the Constitution must prevail at all times, and political parties are free to exhibit what they want. But I don't think one should wear their religion on their sleeve and identify with that. Because as a politician, when I win an election, I get some votes more than my opponent, but I don't get all votes. But doesn't mean I only work for those people. I have to work for everybody. So when you win an election, you have to have an open heart and mind to be able to accept guys who didn't vote for you. That's what democracy is. And if you lose, you must have the grace to accept defeat and carry on working for development. But you can't let language, religion, background, ethnicity, culture define or decide what policymakers must do or not do. And in terms of, you talked about the Congress party. It's a very old party, it's 140 years old, and many people have said many things about the party, but it is a true national party in every sense of the word. And yes, we've lost 2 or 3 general elections, but we won plenty before. And I think this election has shown us that anyone who thought that it will be a Congress Mukt Bharat or a Congress ke bina Bharat chalne wala hai, anyone who said that was very, very mistaken. In fact, deeply mistaken. And with all humility, I think we've accepted the verdict of the people. But the verdict, in my view, is also a pushback on the kinds of things we saw in the last 10 years. So if that was appreciated, the numbers would have gone up for the incumbents, but they haven't gone up. They've actually come down. Again, last point. Religion and faith. We are a deeply religious country. We are a deeply spiritual country. And for 5,000 years in our history, we've only learned to not tolerate, but to accept. I tolerate you. That's not the right way to look at it. I accept who you are. I understand who you are. We have to live in peace with each other. So this tolerance-intolerance debate is futile, because tolerating someone is like giving someone aap ehsan kar rahe ho kisi ke upar. That's not the way. Respect, have your boundaries, do what you have to do, and carry on together.
Similar to what Dr. Shashi Tharoor said recently, India's never been a tolerant country because to tolerate means I know you're wrong, but I'll tolerate it. We accept and with open arms and how, but I'll leave it at that.
Let's open up the questions to audience. We will take 2 at once. Is that okay, Sachin?
Very eager to ask questions, I must say.
So let's take 2 at once. Can we begin with the lady here? And then the gentleman just beside her.
Hi, Sachin. I'm Dr. Priya Vimani, and I noticed that all of today, none of the speakers were fielded with a question about AI policy and India. So I would love to know where India is currently located with AI policy, especially with the bottom of the pyramid and with aspiration, and your personal views on it as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Shall we take one more? Just there, please. Thanks.
Hello, Mr. Pilot. My name is Deepak. My question is a follow-up on the question that Kishen asked around fiscal prudence. So basically what I want to understand is, what was your party's policy in Karnataka where certain welfare schemes were applied to win the state elections, which has now bankrupted the state exchequer, but the benefits of the SOPs has not seen the light. So what was the decision making behind it? And just another spin on that, in the UK, we have some independent bodies like the IFS, Institute of Fiscal Studies, that independently verifies manifestos, election manifestos. Do you think India should also have that so that the voters can have an honest view of some of these election manifesto pledges that political parties make?
Okay, good. I'll answer the lady first. So I don't know what the current government's immediate stand on that is, but I do keep following what the Europeans are doing, what the Americans are doing in terms of legislation about AI. And some countries have actually stopped research because they feel that it's too dangerous to deal with. My own view is that you really can't stop technology. It's like water. It'll come in one way or the other. Best is to get behind it and see what benefits we can get out of it. But I can already see lots of issues with deep fake and sort of so much scamming going on. And as machines get smarter, regulations always lag behind. And I only think that in India, it's a matter of time before we'll be faced with the same consequences. So I think there has to be a global approach. It can't just be one country making a law or legislation. My own personal view is that we must embrace it, but with a lot of oversight, a lot of filtration of facts, and fixing responsibilities of what's happening. Because the actual populace will have no control over this. So the legislators, the watchdogs, and the governments have to really have a framework that is working for the benefit of the people in dealing with AI. You can't have a blanket yes or no. And it has to be at a global network, global footing. It can't just be about one country, one continent. And the other question gentleman asked. So it's always a chicken-egg question, right? So we are now almost a $5 trillion economy. But we want to give free food to 800 million people. What does that tell us? Either we are not the world's third, fourth largest economy, and why do you have to give free food to so many people? Different state governments have made different announcements, and because you asked about Karnataka specifically, Karnataka, we won that election. In fact, we won Telangana also, Himachal Pradesh also. So every state has a different resource management, different financial capacity. Right? What Punjab has, Mizoram will not have. But Karnataka is one state, I think, where revenue generation and future planning is quite well in place. So I don't think we have to worry too much about that. But if a political party has made a commitment, the matter, by the way, I think is in courts about what the manifesto should say and should not say. So it's quite, it's being debated at the court. So I don't want to talk anything because the subject is. But we have to fix accountability, whether it's a leader's announcement, whether it's a manifesto, whether it's a government's promise. If you're saying something and not delivering, one has to be held to account, no matter who it is. I agree with you on that front. But I think it's not correct to do cherry picking, because if we talk about one state, I think with 20 other states where a lot more was done and not done. So it's a no-sum game. But Karnataka, by the way, financially has very, very strong fundamentals. So there's no question of the government not having enough resources to deliver what we committed to.
We are out of time, but let's take very quick two questions. Very quick two questions. Gentlemen here, if you can ask. Very quick. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
And Sachin, my name is Partheesh, and I liked your answer on the foreign policy. Thank you. That was really wonderful.
Thank you.
My question to you is, the Financial Times recently wrote an article after they interviewed Rahul Gandhi. And you spoke about India punching above its weight. This year, the 50 countries in the world are going to elections. One of the brightest lights was supposed to be India. Do you think, he made a statement saying that this government is going to fall far very quickly, and people from the coalition are in touch with us, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think in this context and the ability to punch above the weight is there by the leader who might become the leader of the opposition making such irresponsible statements?
Okay.
Okay, I'll take the second question. I'll answer you.
Yeah. Gentleman there.
Sachin, your opening comment about Indian democracy was basically music to my ears. And my question on that one, there is some section of politician back home in India sort of consciously or unconsciously setting up a narrative which seems very negative on a global context. So what is your take on that one, and
So I
how?
didn't get the question. What's the question?
Even I didn't. So can you tell that again?
So my question is you praise about Indian democracy, right? And there is some section of politicians back home in India, they are setting sort of narrative consciously or unconsciously, which has sort of very negative impact about Indian democracy in global context. So how do you see that one? And how do you think this something can be avoided?
Democratic backsliding.
Okay, so thank you for your question. I didn't want to go into that direction, but because you pointed us there, so it's best if I take it head on. For a political party or political leader to comment about what just happened, it's neither wrong, immoral, or unethical. Because the two partners that the BJP has chosen to take with itself, Mr. Nitish Kumar and Mr. Naidu, have had a very checkered history. They've been with the Congress, been with the United Front, been with the NDA, gone, come back, and Mr. Kumar, I think, has done 7 somersaults, 7. So to just historically look at the fact that this government of coalition may have issues, most certainly, on the first day when the government was announced, the JDU spokesperson talked about abolishing the Agniveer scheme. Right? That's the Indian Army's recruitment scheme. So that was the first statement coming from a coalition partner on whose crutches the government depends on. And you must know very well that Nitish Kumarji was with us for the longest time. In fact, he was the one who started the India Alliance, and then something shifted and he just went back to the BJP just with eve of elections. So this sort of somersault has happened multiple times. So it's not, and history teaches you what the future might hold. So I think the comment is more about those two ally partners not having a impeccable track record of loyalty to a political party. That's one. Second, I think a political leader talking about this is fine, but someone who is much more important, someone who's holding important positions, and to make statements about religion and about one of the 2 buffaloes being stolen away or the Mangal suits being taken away, those kind of comments also, I think, don't reflect nicely on a country like ours. Therefore, we can go on. I'm just saying that you have to work. Election is a very, very tumultuous time, and we all say things in the heat of the moment. People file defamation cases, people go to court. Of course, our media channels are fantastic. 9 o'clock, you can just put them all on, and you will not get sleep for 3 days if you hear all of them. So all that goes on. But I think there has to be a semblance of decency, semblance of acceptance of the fact that you are not alone. There are other people in the ring who will fight back, and you can't disregard anyone. You can't use the state agencies to humiliate, defame, and character assassinate someone for so long. That also, I think, is unacceptable. And I think this election result, I don't want to say it, but this election result has said that what has been going on is not okay. The shortfall of MPs in the ruling dispensation is primarily a reflection of, I think, what the people have said, that this is not okay. That pushback came from that. Baki, I must end with this, by the way, because you said this about election. Coalition governments have lasted before and have not lasted before, right? 96, 98, 99, we had 3 elections because coalition government didn't last. But you had UPA and DA which lasted. So we don't know what the future holds. I think whatever may happen should happen for the best, and the country and India, we must all move ahead and progress.